It is the original dragon type that may have set the trend for how dragon types behave, but future models never quite followed suit. It is DRA00 Moon Dragon, with the kit of Deathlock, Field Repair, Restore, Float Legs, and the leg ability of Auto Repair, which passively restores HP to all parts when charging Metaforce passively. Now, as a model that's available in the permanent banner, Moon Dragon is one of those rare few that may not look like much at first glance, but looking a little deeper beyond the skin of the issue here shows he's actually a lot more viable than what a lot of people would expect. Deathlock on the head and his only melee skill equipped is a negative ailment that is arguably one of the most powerful and most potent in the game. Simply explained, when inflicting Deathlock on an opponent, it will guarantee that all hits land and all hits will be critical hits on top of that, flapping them with no dodge and no defense. And in addition to this, will also debuff their heat and cool stat by about 25% each. So that means that not only every hit will land and be immensely painful, but they also will be going notably slower compared to how they were before. This can be really, really good for setting up for a nuke to come behind Moon Dragon to finish the job, or even if you equip him with something a little stronger or more potent, he could even do the job himself, absolutely. And at the same time, buy yourself just that little extra bit of time if you are just barely scraping by with barely outrunning them. Field Repair on the right arm is a healing skill that, once used, will restore HP to all active parts on the target that are not broken. This can be either himself or another ally on the field, and the level of healing that he grants will be relative to the amount of healing that his medal has equipped as a mastery. So naturally, a medal with a perfect mastery of 99 of healing, even for an AoE, will grant a pretty decent chunk of HP back, whereas one with only 51 or 0 may not give back too much. Left Arm of Restore is another healing skill that, once activated, will bring back one broken part of himself or an ally he is targeting back to 10% HP. Now, that 10% HP may not sound like too much at first glance, but honestly, when it gets down to the bare wire and essentials of it, if it's better to have the part at 10% than not to have it at all, and this especially applies with leg parts too. On the topic of legs, being float-legged means that Moon Dragon will have very solid coverage across most terrains at A rank across the board, minus of course S rank on Cyber, but more on his leg stats in just a moment. When it comes to his armor, this dragon type is actually a lot tankier than what people would actually expect at first glance, with a head armor of about 3600, arms also at about 3600, and his legs about 3550. He's packing a pretty solid HP pool that'll make him a relatively decent and hard-hitting enemy to take down quickly, though he can certainly tank a hit without it crippling him too easily. On his leg stats, though, they certainly aren't too shabby, but they aren't certainly the greatest thing either. One thing of note is that he is incapable of supporting any heavy parts, which means this leg may not be the most suited for the more conventional battles, especially when it comes to PvP or competitive meta. But with a mobility of 669, he's kind of in that middle tier of where float legs typically tend to sit, and of course this also is factoring in before any meta rodder or terrain bonuses will buff this up. So it's certainly nice where you want to expect, and you can kind of relatively safely rely on the heat and cool stat of the equipped parts or the meta rodder bonus to really compensate for any extra speed you might be missing. A melee resist of 1103 is pretty solid, but a shoot resist of 529 is most certainly not great. So while this dragon can certainly hold himself well up close and personal, taking pot shots from afar will certainly spell the end for this ancient dragon type. However, he is also packing an evade of 1022, which is not too shabby either, as it does mean he will have a very relatively solid and decent time dodging or grazing a lot of low success or incoming attacks that might be coming in blind. As a pure set score, though, all this aside, I do have to rate him a pretty solid 6.6 out of 10, and some arguments could even be made for a 6.5 depending on how you use him. While granted, he does have 2 healing parts equipped on him, that does kind of dictate how you want to use him, but between his healing skill and auto repair on his leg ability, this tanky dragon can actually hold his own moderately well, and even though Restore can only bring back one part at a time, in contrast to Revive or All Restore or something of the like, it's still better than not having anything to bring back broken parts with at all. Plus, having Deathlock will actually give him something of a competitive edge too, even if it's not for himself, but mostly to help set up for his allies. So setting him up for someone with, say, a dedicated shoot nuker or a melee nuker, or even not even a nuker at all, Deathlock actually makes it to the point where even your auxiliary fighters that don't specialize in raw damage can deal damage like your dedicated nuker can. Or if it is your dedicated nuker, guarantee that every hit is going to be the most painful it could possibly be. As mixed parts, I do have to rate him just a little bit higher at about a 7 out of 10, and a very solid model that you really can't ever go wrong with getting a hold of. Not only does the fact that Deathlock is non-heavy, but it is also permanently available, which means this actually does put him at a little bit of an edge over, say, Titan Beetle, which is also in the permanent banner, but also with Deathlock on the head, but is packing it as a heavy part. The fact that Moondragon's is not heavy means that you can fit a very nasty ailment skill pretty much anywhere on any team without having to worry about the heavy limit. Plus, as mentioned, even though his legs can't support any heavy parts, auto repair is certainly something you really can't ever go wrong with using either, even if just for the sake of having that passive HP restoration on the side. And while field repair may not be one of the greatest or most efficient healing methods ever, as it is an AoE and will spread it equally, it is still something worth considering just for the sake of having that restoration on the team.